Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. Just going to be going over every single game that we got in Week 5. It was a wild week. A lot of players kind of maybe broke out, finally had some ceiling performances that we were waiting for. Had some obvious disappointments as well. It was a bit of a down week for some studs as always. So I'll just go over every single game, sort of tell you guys what I think is prescriptive going forward, what we can actually take from it, and how we can sort of adapt for and take what we learned this week and help us out moving forward. So yeah, I'll touch on all, I believe, 14 games we had this week. We had 4 teams on bye, so the Chargers, the Titans, Lions, and Eagles did not play, but learned a lot about the other 28 teams, and it should be a fun video here. So kick back. It's going to be a pretty long video, obviously. These ones are pretty long, but hopefully you guys learn from it. And if you have any questions or comments, just let me know in the comments below, and I'll get back to you. So yeah, with that, let's get into the first game here. Starting things off with Thursday Night Football, we had the Bucs at the Falcons. It was awesome to see the Falcons ball out like that. Just really great to see this offense finally click there. I think it really does put Kirk Cousins pretty firmly in the streaming category going forward. I'm not trying to be overreactive to a 509-yard passing game. That will be the most yards Kirk Cousins throws for all season. But it's great to see that the ceiling's there. You don't just do that if you're a bad quarterback. It seems like Kirk Cousins is getting back to it. Obviously, it still looks like he has a little bit of a tough time just putting as much oomph on the ball as he has in the past, but looks good enough. He's still a really talented, high IQ quarterback. I think he's going to do a lot for this offense to help keep things moving. And with plush matchups, he's definitely a guy we can consider streaming. Gets Carolina next week. I think we could certainly consider him a streaming option. Darnell Mooney, almost a weekly must start at this point, balled out. Drake London had a great game as well, so you can play both those guys. But like Mooney was the number one target on this team. He's been the number one receiver so far this season. I think we really need to start considering Mooney as like a solid low-end wide receiver 2 the rest of the way. For Bijan, don't panic about him. I know it sucks to see the usage, the really heavy, or not heavy, but annoying involvement of Tyler Algier. Only has 1 touchdown so far on the season, so that's a little bit unlucky. Seeing this offense get better and better should open up more scoring opportunities for him. And I just want to highlight, he had a hamstring injury the week before, so he popped up on the injury report Friday, right before week 4. Since then, they played a game 2 days later. He played 64% of the snaps, and then 4 days later than that, on short rest, he played 67% of the snaps. Prior to that, he played 89, 75, and 82% of the snaps. So, a bit over, that's an 82% snap share average there, down to 65. So we saw like a 20% snap share reduction just because of this injury. I think people are really panicked about it because of what happened last year. I'm not. I view him still as like an 80% snap share guy in this offense. If you can trade low for Bijan, it's a great time to do it because he's going to be the starting running back against the Panthers next week. Every team runs well against the Panthers. Bijan's going to break out in week 6. For the Bucs, they looked good again. Didn't learn a whole lot. Both running backs, low-end RB plays for me if you want to take anything away from it. We saw Bucky fumble. Saw Rachaad White get rolled up on a little bit. I don't think anything serious there. Both of them are just like low-end RB2s for me, guys you can play, but that you don't need to going forward. Next game here was the Jets at the Vikings in London. So for the Jets, they're broken. They just don't look good at all. Aaron Rodgers has not played well, had 3 interceptions, didn't look good. Kind of sucks watching Aaron Rodgers play right now because every play he makes a bad play and then yells at somebody. So it's just not really fun to watch Aaron Rodgers play right now. We did see Garrett Wilson get 1 million targets. I believe he had 22 targets. Turned it into just over 100 yards, so by no means was he efficient. But if he's going to get 22 targets every week, he's obviously going to be a monster. That's not necessarily going to happen, but it's great to see him get that high target volume. I still view him as more of like a wide receiver 2 going forward. I don't think that like top 10 wide receiver upside is really in there for him. This Jets offense just isn't very good, and they obviously want to play with a lead, play good defense. They don't want to throw the ball 40 to 50 times like they have the last couple of weeks. Breece Hall becoming really frustrating. He just hasn't looked good. This Jets offense looks really bad. Braylon Allen's getting involved enough that it's annoying. I think Breece Hall is like a low-end RB1 the rest of the season, but it's kind of a pivotal tipping point here for him. They do have a matchup against the Bills next week, who have been really bad against opposing running backs. Should be a smash spot for him, so I'm not giving up on Breece Hall, obviously. You're still playing him every single week here, but it does suck to know that the floor really is really low. And then Allen Lazard might be a flex caliber asset. It's going to be game script dependent because he's not the primary read, but they are using him quite a bit. I think we can at least look at him as like a low-end flex play in deeper leagues. For the Vikings, Sam Darnold looked kind of awful. He started out pretty well with a good game script early on in the game, and then just sort of fell apart. Didn't look good. They won despite him this week. Justin Jefferson, you're starting him every single week. Doesn't really matter. We did see Aaron Jones get banged up in this one. He left pretty early in the game. Might have correlated pretty well with when Sam Darnold sort of fell apart. Ty Chandler had a fumble in this one. They do have their bye in week 6, so don't know a whole lot right now. If Aaron Jones is going to miss extended time, Ty Chandler's obviously a really great pickup because I do think he's a talented enough player, and the Vikings will figure it out on offense with or without Aaron Jones. But Aaron Jones is obviously a really important part of this offense, so it would be just a slight downgrade for everybody if he's out, except for Ty Chandler, who would obviously get a bump. Next, we had the Panthers go to Chicago to play the Bears. The Panthers, they kind of let us down in this one. The offense just couldn't put up many points, and it's not entirely surprising. The Bears have been an elite defense, especially against the pass so far, so we need to start really recognizing that. They're effectively a run funnel defense, so you can run against the Chicago Bears, but you can't throw against them. So let's just really heavily reduce our expectations for opposing passers and pass catchers against the Bears going forward. And we can kind of bump up running backs a little bit. Chuba was great again, had over 100 scrimmage yards and a touchdown. Chuba looks awesome. It'll be interesting to see what happens when Brooks comes back, but Chuba's going to be involved for sure. For the Bears, DeAndre Swift dominated again. You're playing him every single week going forward, but again, I just want to highlight that his only two good matchups so far, or his only two good games so far have come up in absolutely fantastic matchups. So I don't want to completely go away from him because he is still like looking really good. I don't want to take that away from him, but let's just pump the brakes just a little bit. I view him as more of like a fringe top 15 running back the rest of the way. DJ Moore did really great again this week. Looked awesome. It was great to see him bounce back and have a bit better chemistry with Caleb Williams. He's the only wide receiver I want to trust in Chicago going forward, but we did see the Bears really take a bit of a step forward. Caleb Williams looks like he's getting better every single week, but again, pump the brakes. It is the Carolina Panthers. Everybody could go out there and play well against them. I could probably throw for 200 yards against them. Just kidding. Not a very good quarterback by any means, but point being, the Panthers are not a very good defense. We're not going to learn a lot about teams that are playing them, but it is good to see them take advantage of the matchup because you don't get to control who you play. You could always lay an egg against those bad teams, and seeing the Bears not do that is obviously promising. Next, we have the Browns go to Washington to play the Commanders. We'll start things off with saying the Browns suck. They're not fun to watch. Cooper is probably the only Cleveland Brown I really want to trust going forward at all. He had a lot of targets, only caught 4 for 60, so not great, but enough to, he didn't bury you at all, despite the fact that the Browns were just absolutely horrible on offense. David Njoku, this one sucked. We saw him come in, catch the first pass of the game, then leave pretty shortly after with a knee injury. That one sucks to see. Hopefully he can get back on the field. Sounds like he has an MRI tomorrow. So we'll see what's going to happen there, but it just sucks to see that. I really hope we could see Jameis Winston at some point. The Browns seem like they're just stuck, like upper management or something is not allowing them to make a quarterback change, but there's no good reason that we aren't seeing Jameis Winston run this offense right now. It's letting everybody else down. I know their offensive line is banged up. Pass catchers aren't really doing a lot to help him out, but Deshaun Watson looks absolutely awful. I don't want to see him play football anymore. It's just not fun. Just keep an eye out for Amari Cooper as well as a trade candidate. I won't be shocked at all if he gets traded to someone like the Chiefs or the Bills or something, because there are a couple contending wide receiver needy teams out there, and Amari Cooper's a guy that seems a little unhappy to be there, and he's a pretty easy trade candidate for the Browns. So it does make Jerry Jeudy, who we'll talk about in the waiver video, an interesting pickup as well, because I do think that it feels pretty likely that Amari Cooper gets traded at this point, and when that happens, Jerry Jeudy's going to be the number one wide receiver there. For the Commanders, Jaden Daniels continues to look awesome. Play him every single week. The backfield is something that I want to talk about a little bit, just because this offense is doing so well that it's making a lot of value available for that backfield. I think Eckler and Brian Robinson are both startable going forward. Obviously, Brian Robinson is the better play. Didn't see a ton of usage this week because we knew he was banged up heading into the week, but he sort of bailed you out with 2 touchdowns. Eckler looks good. Jeremy Nichols scored as well. You could do a lot worse than starting Commander running backs going forward here. Next, we had the Dolphins at the Patriots in a bit of a shocker here. Both teams struggled to score in this one. No surprise there. It was a low-scoring game. I believe we saw the Dolphins win 15-10. Big bummer on this one. We saw Devon Achane leave with a concussion. They do have a bye next week, so it's good timing, I guess, if there was ever going to be a good time to have a concussion. Probably makes it a non-issue. Normally, you see players miss one game and then come back after a concussion. Obviously, that's not the case for every single concussion there, but in general, I think it's safe to say we'll see Devon Achane in Week 7. Raheem Mostert got a lot of touches in his first game back. Looked good as well. I think it's going to be, we'll see what we expect when Achane comes back. It'll be Mostert and Achane both getting the rock. Obviously, this offense is not going to do a lot until we see Tua come back, but at least they've got a bye now. They're 2-3, so they kind of saved their season by winning this game. 2 weeks to prepare for the next matchup. I believe they play the Cardinals in Week 7. That's maybe a winnable game. So their season's not over by any means. If they can just tread water until Tua comes back, they do have a shot there. For the Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson seemed to have his job back right away. I believe he took his second carry of the game for like a 33-yard touchdown after being quote-unquote benched for Antonio Gibson due to his fumbling issues. But Antonio Gibson played well again as well. I think both those guys are honestly the two most talented players in this offense right now. So I think they both need to be rostered. Obviously, you can start Ramondre every single week, and then Gibson is just a guy that, we're one fumble away for Ramondre at this point where they just won't play him anymore. So Gibson does need to be rostered, and he's a guy you could flex or play as a low-end RB2 in PPR if you needed to. For the pass catchers, Demario Douglas, probably the only wide receiver to own in New England right now, but it's gross. This offense is awful. They play really slow. It's just not fun to watch the Patriots, but if you want to play a receiver there, it's Demario Douglas. So it's a 14-team legal option only, but just keep him in mind if you need to. Next, we saw the Colts at the Jaguars. The Jaguars are just so bad on defense that it's really awesome watching all of their games. They run really quickly on offense, and then they give up points so fast on defense that you can actually see a lot of high-scoring games for the Jaguars going forward. So I do want to target their games going forward. Same thing with the Colts. They want to play really fast as well, so that's great to see. We saw Joe Flacco elevate this entire wide receiver room. It does suck because we're going to see Anthony Richardson again as soon as he's healthy. It just makes too much sense for the Colts to do that because they're building towards the future there. They're not necessarily trying to win now, but Joe Flacco does certainly elevate all these pass catchers. I think it's fair to say, though, that Josh Downs might be the wide receiver one in the offense. We saw Pittman score the touchdown, but Downs the clear number one target. Alec Pierce is a guy that keeps getting open deep somehow. So, yeah, I mean, I never want to bring him up on waiver wire videos because the usage and the target share is so low that I can't imagine playing him. But, like, if you're really down bad in a deep league and you need some upside, it's there because he's always a threat to catch a 50-yard touchdown. So he's at least someone worth looking at. For the Jaguars, Brian Thomas, he's a stud. I believe he's the wide receiver 9 on the season. It's just Saturday night. I traded David Njoku and Devin Singletary for him. Won me my matchup in that game just barely. I barely won the end of Monday night. So really stoked about that. I think Brian Thomas is a guy that can be a top 15 wide receiver the rest of the way. Christian Kirk looked great as well. He's obviously the number 2 in this offense behind Brian Thomas, but both those guys are really good. Tank Bigsby looks like the best running back on the Jaguars roster right now. Keep an eye on Travis Etienne as a trade candidate at the deadline. There have been rumors circulating about that. I believe this is his 4th year on his contract, so they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. Don't quote me on that. They might have picked up his 5th-year option, but he's a guy that could move if they do believe Tank Bigsby's the future of that backfield. He's playing really great. They've got Dearness Johnson as a decent backup as well if they needed to move on from Etienne. So to keep an eye on him, I could see potentially Travis Etienne being traded at the deadline this year. Next, we had the Bills at the Texans. Buffalo starting to get a little bit concerning for me. They're running a really slow pace of play from the offensive side of the ball. We saw last year they were the 31st most run-heavy offense after making the offensive coordinator change, but they were also the fastest pace of play offense, so it almost didn't matter. And then you also had Josh Allen running the ball a lot, so it sort of helped offset that. I know Josh Allen's been dealing with an injury to his non-throwing hand, so maybe they're trying to keep him from running the ball quite as much, slow things down. But their defense is really bad, and they need Josh Allen to play a lot better than he did this last week. But just none of their receivers are helping him out either. He went 9 for 30 through the air. No, that's not a date that I just put on there. That is 9 for 30 in terms of his completions. He completed 30% of his passes this week. Just think back to week 1 when everybody gave Anthony Richardson a ton of crap for going 9 for 19. Josh Allen wishes he went 9 for 19 this week. So really bad performance by the Bills offense in general outside of James Cook, who was still awesome. Josh Allen was okay for fantasy. He got one big play on a kind of broken play from Keon Coleman, but that's about it there. I don't love that. They play the Jets next week, so I don't feel awesome about that. I can't imagine sitting Josh Allen, but it does feel bad. James Cook seems like the only must start in that offense if you have like a really good streaming option. If you drafted Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels, I'd play Jaden Daniels for a little bit until we see Josh Allen turn things around. Khalil Shakir, I think, is really important to that offense, and him not being there sucks because there's nobody else he can trust. Like throwing the ball to Mac Hollins and Curtis Samuel is just not going to get it done. So it's worth noting there, but we'll see. I think the Texans or the Bills will figure it out, but it just sucks to see an offense that I think a lot of us invested really heavily on. Dalton Kincaid, James Cook really being the only guy who are even remotely useful. I know Kincaid wasn't great, but with how bad the tight end position is, you're still playing him every week. It's just tough to see with the Bills right now, so I'm a little bit panicked, but I don't want to just completely panic sell those guys, especially James Cook. I'm not worried about, but the pass catchers do need to be worried about a little bit. For the Texans, they look great still. They did lose Nico mid-game to a hamstring injury. It sounds like he's week to week right now, so hopefully nothing too serious. Hopefully maybe he just misses one game, or hopefully nothing, but we'll see what happens there. It's going to make, obviously, Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell a lot better if he misses. Xavier Hutchinson's the next guy up if you want to get really desperate in a deep league. I don't want to. It just makes Dalton Schultz a better streaming option at the tight end position if you need to. And then Joe Mixon, they need him back as well. I know Cam Akers scored in this one, but Mixon's going to be a big part of this offense when he's back, and I definitely can't wait to see him back in there for the Texans. Next, we had the Ravens at the Bengals. This was certainly the best game of the week. Maybe you could say this Buccaneers-Falcons game was, but this game was absolutely awesome. We saw Lamar, Derrick Henry, and Zay Flowers all be awesome here. You're playing those guys. Lamar and Henry for sure every single week. Zay Flowers seems like he's a little bit game script dependent, but it's nice to know that the ceiling games are still there. Isaiah Likely scored twice, had 3 catches for like 13 yards, but 2 touchdowns, so that'll do it. That's plenty. Mark Andrews had no catches going into the fourth quarter, but finished with, I believe, 4 for 55. So final stat line doesn't look all that bad. If you saw Charlie Kohler, however you pronounce it, catch like a 50-yard pass, Isaiah Likely get 2 touchdowns. It obviously sucks if you're a Mark Andrews owner. I benched him for Zach Ertz in a league, so that feels good. But point being, I don't Or it does not. It actually doesn't feel good. It sucks. But my point being, like, I don't know if I can really trust Andrews. We saw Lamar ball out. I believe he had 4 passing touchdowns, over 400 passing yards, and Mark Andrews was still just like mid. So I don't love that. The Ravens are a really good team. They play the Cleveland, not the Cleveland Browns this week. Um, they play the Commanders next week. So Commanders might be able to keep pace. Maybe we'll see a high passing volume offense again, but it just makes Mark Andrews like a low end streaming option for me at the tight end spot. Feels like everyone outside of Lamar and Derrick Henry are going to be super game script dependent. For the Bengals, Joe Burrow looked absolutely awesome. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both balled out. Each of them scored twice. That was great to see, especially for T. Higgins, who really hadn't done a lot so far this season. So it's good to see that that ceiling is still there. We saw Chase Brown find the end zone, and Zach Moss got banged up. So Chase Brown's going to be a really popular waiver ad if he's somehow available. A guy that I think will be like a low end RB2. But just keep an eye on Zach Moss injury. It was an ankle injury. Don't know anything yet right now about how long he's going to be out. I anticipate him missing at least one game. It looked like a high ankle sprain to me just looking at it, but not a doctor. We'll see what happens there. So if he does miss time, I think Chase Brown's going to be a must start in fantasy until Zach Moss comes back. Next, we saw the Raiders at the Broncos. The Raiders looked awful. I mean, they started off really hot. They had a 60-yard touchdown to Brock Bowers, drove the ball down the field, scored a field goal. We're driving again. It really looked like this Broncos offense or defense was just absolutely crumbling, and then they got a pick six, and the Raiders just couldn't get anything going after that. So the Broncos do have one of the best defenses in the league, so I don't want to overreact about the Raiders, but the Raiders aren't a team we expect to be good on offense anyway. This just sort of proved it. They switched quarterbacks mid-game. They'll probably do it at some point this season. It just sucks if you're, I wouldn't expect a whole lot out of the Raiders going forward. Brock Bowers being a lone bright spot, 60-yard touchdown. He's a really talented player. We're starting him every single week. None of the running backs or anything really got a lot going. I don't trust anything really there for the Raiders. Javonte finally showed some signs of life for the Broncos. Didn't score a touchdown, but he caught 5 passes for 50 yards. Actually looked decent on the ground. I think there's at least potential for Javonte to be better going forward here. The Broncos, their defense is playing really well. If they can keep winning games, give themselves some short fields, you could see Javonte be like a decent low-end RB2, so I don't want to completely bury him. But it is a bit of a split. Jaleel McLaughlin is still involved. We could see Audric Estime back next week. I'm not excited about Javonte, but a lot of us are really running back needy. If he got dropped or something, like he got dropped in one of my leagues, I picked him up. I didn't play him this week, but like he's not the kind of player that I think belongs on waivers. He at least needs to be on rosters. Still tough to do a lot outside of that. Cortland Sutton sucked. We saw Josh Reynolds catch a touchdown, but he was the only. It was like his only catch of the game. Bo Nix was actually somehow pretty decent for fantasy, despite none of the receivers being good. He's honestly running the ball quite a bit as well. I don't want to understate that. He's decent in that regard. So in really plus matchups, 2 quarterback leagues, Bo Nix is at least someone we could look at in fantasy because he's got more rushing upside than I think people give him credit for. And this Broncos team looks decent so far. They're 3-2. They haven't really beat anyone yet, but just keep an eye on it. I do think that I guess they did beat the Buccaneers, but other than that, they haven't really beat anyone. So to keep an eye on them, they could be an ascending team with a rookie quarterback right now. Next, we saw the Cardinals go into San Francisco and get the win. That was really good for Arizona. They went into this halftime down 23-10 and somehow bounced back and won the game. We saw Kyler bounce back with a big game here, had a 40-yard rushing touchdown in that one. That was great to see. It was a really fun play. He held his hand up in the air like he knew he was going to score when he was 40 yards out of the end zone, so that's always fun. McBride was okay. It was his first game back, looked a little bit limited, but he got open enough. Seemed like a nice safety blanket for Kyler, so, good enough there. Marvin Harrison Jr., it was a disappointment. He and Kyler sort of seemed like they weren't on the same page. He did arguably have the play of the game for the Cardinals. It was a 4th and 5, and they threw up a jump ball for him. He went up and got it. So great to see him come through in a big moment there. Obviously, just wasn't good for fantasy. Better days are ahead here. I believe they play the Packers next week. That should be a high-scoring game. So I think it's totally fine there with Harrison. You're still playing him every single week, but, he's a rookie wide receiver, going to be inconsistent. Don't panic about that. For the Niners, we saw Brandon Ayuk break out. George Kittle looked great. Of course, when those two both go off, it just means that somebody doesn't come through, and that means Deebo wasn't fantastic. I do think the 49ers just missed CMC. I think that Jordan Mason, as great as he's looked, just doesn't have quite the same ceiling that Christian McCaffrey does, not as good of a pass catcher. So CMC, there are some reports he could be back in a few weeks. That'd be really great for the Niners offense going forward. One thing I'll note, I didn't mention it for the Cardinals, though. Michael Wilson looks to be the clear wide receiver 2 in this offense. He's looking pretty good so far. In deeper leagues, if you want to play him as like a low-end flex option, he's a guy that I think needs to be rostered. He's a good player on a good offense right now. Next, we had arguably the shocker of the week. We had the Giants go into Seattle and beat the Seahawks. Seattle might just be really bad on defense. They gave up 23 points to the New York Giants without Malik Nabers and without Devin Singletary. Giving up points at all to the Giants without Malik Nabers, that should be embarrassing. And giving up 23 of them, that's really bad. The Giants had a fumble at the goal line that got returned for 6. This game could have been a blowout, is what I'm saying. Like if that fumble doesn't happen, it's a really questionable call. The Giants kind of absolutely just dominated the Seahawks in this game. The Seahawks, we saw them be really good to start the year on defense, but this is concerning. They play the Niners in Week 6. I think that Niners will be absolutely dominant against them. I know the Seahawks are missing a couple of pieces on defense, but it's 2 straight weeks they've gotten carved up. The Lions kind of excusable, but they did give up like 45 points. The Giants, you just shouldn't give up that many points to the Giants. So Seahawks don't look good on offense here. Tyrone Tracy looked honestly great. I honestly think he might have earned the job, or at least more snaps over Devin Singletary. Was the only running back so far this season with a game where he had 15 carries and all of them went for positive yardage. Just looked really good at 130 total yards. He's a good player, and even with Eric Gregg getting involved in catching some passes, I think Tyrone Tracy's a guy that, if Singletary misses another game, I think we could see a situation where Tracy ends up being like a low-end RB2 going forward. Wandale, Darius Slayton, both got it done. They're decent little players. They got the job done there this week. For the Seahawks, DK Metcalf, he was a disappointment. He had a costly fumble for the second week in a row. Fun fact, he leads all wide receivers in fumbles since the end of the league. So that's kind of a low point for DK, and it doesn't seem like a big deal. You don't really talk about fumbles for receivers, but he's got 9 since the end of the league. That's quite a bit for a wide receiver, so not good for DK at all right there. Kenneth Walker, a huge disappointment as well. The Seahawks offense just didn't do a lot. I think better days are ahead for them. Geno Smith still looked okay. They'll be fine. I think DK's obviously a must start. Kenneth Walker's a must start going forward, but just didn't see a whole lot like you would have wanted out of Seattle this week. Next, we had the Packers at the Rams. Kind of a disappointing game in my mind, to be honest. Jordan Love was okay, 2 touchdowns and an interception. Josh Jacobs was good, scored a touchdown. Tucker Kraft was really the lone star for the Packers, though. Had 2 touchdowns, was obviously great to see, especially out of the tight end position where we've all been hurting. I know a lot of us picked Tucker Kraft up. I picked him up in 2 leagues, didn't play him neither because I picked him up in leagues I have Trey McBride. I really was right up to the last minute considering playing him over McBride, so just knocking myself there for not doing that, but obviously tough call there. Dontavian Wicks, kind of the letdown of the week, got open a lot, just had a ton of drops, just doesn't look like he knows how to catch the ball. It sucks because he's a really talented route runner. I still think there's upside for Wicks going forward, but it sucks to see. You really could have come through with a bigger game there. Kyren, he was great, had over 100 yards, had a touchdown. It's the normal for Kyren right now. He did fumble in this one. That's pretty costly for them, so I don't want to understate that. We also did see Blake Corum get a lot more work than Ronnie Rivers this week. I don't know if that really means anything. It just means that Corum might be a decent handcuff. Right now, while Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua are out, there's no value in the handcuff because if Kyren went down, I think this offense would just absolutely suck. But if you get Puka and Kupp back and then Kyren were to go down, you could see a lot of value out of this backfield if Kyren went down. So I think Blake Corum is the handcuff to own still right now. Jordan Whittington looks like the wide receiver 1 without those 2 receivers. Just got it done again this week. Looked good. 2-2's a low-end flex play if you need him. But the Rams are on bye in Week 6. There's reports that they could get Cooper Kupp back in Week 7, and I think they really need him back. So it's a good time for the Rams to be on bye. They're 1-4. They need to lick their wounds and get healthy quick before they want their season to not fall apart. Next up, we had the really fun Sunday Night Football game between the Cowboys and the Steelers. Pretty old school football here. For the Cowboys, CD and Dak just don't seem like they're on the same page. We saw CD get like 1 target in the entire second half. Saw a bit of a sideline altercation between the two after Dak threw a pick. I don't know. It's tough because it seems like CD just keeps being involved in the first quarter or 2 and then really just falling off after that. I'm sure they'll figure it out. CD's too good of a player. It's just tough. He wasn't at practice all off season. Makes it tough for 2 guys to come into the season and start out on the same page. So I don't want to overreact there. I think these will be okay with CD. I view him as kind of like a buy low candidate, but I don't think anybody's really selling out low on CD right now. For the Cowboys, Dowdle did emerge as the clear lead back here. He's clearly a really talented player. Or not really talented, but just a guy. He's clearly the most talented player they have in that backfield. They need him to be good, and he looked really good this week against Pittsburgh. Jake Ferguson, he's rock solid. He's a guy that I really do think is just a must-start at the tight end position going forward. We saw Jalen Tolbert show flashes. It's great to see because they need someone to step up with Brandon Cooks out. I think Tolbert's a good enough player that he should be in flex consideration going forward. For the Steelers, they struggled again, just couldn't really put anything together on offense. I know they put up 17 points, but that's just not enough against the defense that was missing its 2 best players in Parsons and Lawrence. George Pickens had a limited snap share here. He seems to be in the doghouse. Didn't really look like he was running hard on his routes. Played less snaps than both Calvin Austin and Van Jefferson. I don't know what's going on there. The Steelers seem to have a problem, like a revolving door of talented, just locker room issue wide receivers. Hopefully they sort it out because Pickens is really talented and they need him, but who knows what's going to happen there. Pat Freiermuth, he scored. I believe he had only 3 catches in this one, so breaking his streak of games with 4+, but still useful for fantasy. He's a guy, kind of sucks if you played him because he had that lateral fumble in the last play of the game, so it sort of made him look worse than he was this week because 2 points at the tight end position kind of goes a long way. But, I think Pat's a guy you can play as a low-end tight end one going forward. Going to be interesting, though, to see who the starting quarterback is for Pittsburgh in Week 6. I think this loss can maybe opened up the door for Russ to get a start. I don't know if you guys know, I'm kind of a big Russell Wilson fan. Really hope he can get the start just because, I've loved him ever since he was in Seattle. I grew up in Seattle, big Seahawks fan there. So rooting for him to get some starts here. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens there. They play the Raiders next week, so they'll win either way. But interested to see who gets to start. I think it's going to be, I don't know what's better for fantasy. I think Pickens maybe gets a boost with Russ, but the offense as a whole maybe takes a slight step back. So you don't have the same rushing upside with Russ, but we'll see what happens there. It's going to be an interesting week here. And for the last game of the week here, we had the Saints go to Kansas City. Kind of what we would have expected here. Derek Carr struggled against the Chiefs defense. They sort of had him on lockdown all game. Shaheed connected on a deep bomb, so had a good fantasy day. It's sort of what you need for Shaheed every single week. We did see Chris Olave struggle, 2 catches for 10 yards. I don't want to make people panic there because the Chiefs have been just really great at locking down the opposing team's number one option. Go back to week 1, Mark Andrews, they really made an effort to shut him down. It's what the Chiefs do. They make an effort to take away your number one, so I don't want to completely overreact to that. Also, remember Olave was sort of playing through a hamstring injury last week. I think he wasn't really on the injury report a whole lot this week, but could still be dealing with that. But it sucks. 2 catches for 10 yards. It's not really something you want to trust. They do play the Buccaneers next week, who we just saw Kirk Cousins throw for 500 yards against. So it's going to be tough to not just play Olave again, but they could not have Derek Carr. He did leave this game with an oblique injury. It didn't look like it was crazy serious. I gotta believe if this game was closer or if it was a playoff game, they'd have maybe kept him in there. But we'll see what happens there. But I'm starting to think the Saints are a bit of pretenders on offense. They might not have Derek Carr next week. They're 2-3 now. They play Denver on a short week in Week 7. It might just feel bad. I don't really love it. I think Kamara's still a low-end wide receiver RB1 going forward because of the volume. Still a good player. Shaheed, a boomer bust flex play. Olave, still a low-end wide receiver 2, I think. But it really sucks, so I don't know what to do there. For the Chiefs, I think Juju's the clear wide receiver 1 there. Just looks really good. I mean, I don't know how to say that without joking because he really did look really good. Like, I haven't seen Juju play that well in a long time. He's a good fit for this offense. He knows the system. They need him. And obviously, all the coverage is going towards Travis Kelce right now. So Juju might be a flex asset going forward. It could easily be a trap, though. You could pick him up off waivers, play him next week, and get 2 for 10. So just keep that in mind. Travis Kelce, I think he's going to be the tight end 1 the rest of the way. Just so necessary to the offense. I don't think he's scored a touchdown yet this season. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but the touchdown variant should shift over his way. Looks like he's going to be better going forward, so I think he's a guy that I definitely, if you can buy low on him, the window's probably shut closed, but I do still think he's the tight end 1 going forward just because he's so necessary to the offense. And then Kareem Hunt, he's the RB1 roster here at over 100 total yards. Workhorse for them. CEH wasn't active, so there is still that little wrinkle left, but it's going to be Kareem Hunt's job going forward. I think he's a low-end RB2 the rest of the way. That'll do it for the Week 5 recap. Up next, I'll be going over the waiver wire, so I'll go over every single position, highlight what players I think are worth taking a look at on your waiver wire, and helping you get those waiver claims in ahead of Week 6. Obviously, lots of things flying around, lots of injuries, lots of new developments, and it's really important to make sure that we make our teams better every single week. Waivers are a huge part of that, so I'll be here to help you guys out. Stay tuned for that video. That should come out the same day as this one, so I highly recommend you go watch both of those. If you have any fab questions or anything like that as well, let me know in the comments. Happy to help you guys out there, and stay tuned for that video. There will also be start-sit videos this week. We'll go over trade targets, buy lows, sell highs, do the Sunday morning live stream like always, 1 hour before kickoff. Lots of stuff coming up. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of it, just make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you don't miss any of the future content, because I'll be here all season long to help you guys win some championships with me. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys with the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.